He lost his wife, his family, and even the son he thought was his. But when success came, so did the people who once walked away. My name is Raymond, and if anyone had suggested to me 15 years ago that the child I cherished above all else would one day abandon me, only to return upon learning of my fortune, I would have dismissed it as a heartless joke. Yet existence has a subtle way of dismantling you, one disloyalty after another, until you understand that affection, dedication, and faithfulness hold no value for certain individuals, until they recognize the worth in what they previously rejected. This is the tale of how I assumed the role of a parent, endured total loss, and discovered serenity amid the wreckage of what was once my household. 15 years back, I was 30, contentedly wed to Grace, a lady I thought was my eternal partner. We had been a couple since university. She was the clever, driven one with a chuckle that brightened every space, and I was the stable sort who desired an uncomplicated, reliable existence. Following 5 years of matrimony, Grace announced her pregnancy. I recall sinking to my knees, eyes brimming with tears, murmuring gratitude repeatedly. Achieving fatherhood was my ultimate dream. When our boy Lucas arrived, time seemed to halt. I had never witnessed anything more flawless. The instant he grasped my finger with his small hand, I quietly promised that regardless of worldly events, I would safeguard him, mentor him, and adore him unconditionally. And for many years I fulfilled that. I attended every significant event. The initial step, the first utterance, the debut school day. I labored as an IT expert at an expanding firm, channeling every surplus cent into perfecting our modest residence. Grace held a part-time position as an occasion coordinator, but as Lucas matured, she increasingly spent evenings on late assignments. Initially, I ignored it. Grace was outgoing, she flourished among people, and I wished for her to enjoy her independence. However, as months evolved into years, I started observing minor fractures in our union, details that mismatched. She protected her device as if it contained classified information. She returned home scented with lavish aftershave that wasn't mine, and her mirth, formerly effortless and authentic, grew terse and remote. Nevertheless, I convinced myself to avoid hasty judgments. We possessed a family, after all. We had Lucas, all collapsed when Lucas reached 7. I arrived home prematurely one Friday when Grace's phone vibrated on the surface. A notification appeared, unable to forget last evening. You appeared radiant in blue. It originated from a contact labeled G. I remained immobile, my reality crumbling gradually. I refrained from challenging her immediately. I required certainty. Over the subsequent week, I discreetly collected proof, bills, communications, even images. It wasn't long before the reality emerged. Grace had been involved with a gentleman called Harold, a client of hers, for almost 2 years. When I ultimately addressed her, she didn't weep. She didn't refute it. She merely stated, "Ray, it wasn't intentional. You were constantly occupied." I felt isolated. That term devastated me more than the infidelity. I had toiled extra hours to provide her and Lucas with all, yet somehow that caused her isolation. We parted temporarily, but I continued daily visits for Lucas. He served as my foundation, the sole blameless being in this turmoil. I couldn't allow my resentment to taint him. Then arrived the moment that obliterated my remaining tranquility. In a therapy meeting, Grace revealed something she had concealed even from her own awareness. The liaison hadn't commenced 2 years prior. It started before her conception. There existed a possibility, a genuine, terrifying possibility that Lucas wasn't biologically mine. I recall turning numb, as if my essence had departed my form. I scarcely endured that gathering. Grace sobbed, implored me not to devastate all with an examination, asserting Lucas was mine in all meaningful aspects. But I needed confirmation. I organized a confidential DNA analysis. Upon receiving the outcomes, the document seemed weightier than anticipated. One sentence, one fact, likelihood of fatherhood, 0%. Lucas was not my natural child. I gazed at that document for what seemed like eternities until my tears obscured the text. My whole existence, every grin, every nighttime tale, every triumphant instant had been constructed on deception. Grace disintegrated when I informed her of my knowledge, but I no longer harbored rage, merely vacancy. We dissolved our marriage shortly thereafter. Lucas was 8 at the finalization of documents. The judiciary declared I owed no child maintenance since I wasn't the genetic parent, but I declined to abandon him. Genetics aside, I was his father. I persisted in aiding him monetarily and sentimentally, seeing him each weekend, attending educational functions, and instilling principles of compassion and determination. Grace began courting Harold publicly. He gradually became a consistent presence in Lucas's world, but I endeavored not to meddle. I believed I could divide parenthood despite the pain. When Lucas turned 10, Harold relocated in. That's when dynamics started altering. My formerly affectionate lad began withdrawing. The embraces shortened. The dialogues grew chillier. By age 13, he ceased addressing me as Dad. I became Ray. One night, he uttered something that fractured my remaining spirit. "Harold's my actual parent regardless. Why do you bother?" He had discovered the reality. Grace had disclosed it. And rather than shielding me, she depicted me as a forlorn individual unable to release. I still recollect sitting in my vehicle that evening post-drop-off, clutching the wheel until my palms trembled. I assured myself I'd continue cherishing him anyhow, as that's what parents do. But affection doesn't endure where bitterness resides. By 15, Lucas scarcely communicated with me. He adopted Harold's surname and halted visits completely. Grace and Harold wed, and from then on, it was as though I had never been. Years elapsed. I immersed myself in employment, ascended the professional hierarchy, and ultimately launched my own cybersecurity enterprise. It demanded restless evenings, countless setbacks, and unyielding tenacity. But by 45, I had created something extraordinary, something that granted me tranquility. I never wed again. Confidence was a dialect I no longer comprehended. Then one dawn, unexpectedly, I received a communication. "Hey Ray, it's Lucas. Can we converse?" I examined that message for almost 60 minutes. After all those years, after he had expunged me from his existence, now he desired dialogue. We convened at a coffee house. He was 23 now, assured and refined, attired in upscale garments that shouted affluence and aspiration. He grinned uneasily and remarked, "You appear well. Learned your business is thriving, huh?" There it emerged. It didn't require much time for him to note that circumstances hadn't been favorable for him. Harold had departed from his mother, finances were constrained, and he aimed to recover stability. He sought a bond once more, a rapport, another opportunity. But as he conversed, I discerned he wasn't pursuing absolution. He was pursuing prospects. For the initial occasion, I perceived him not as the youth I nurtured, but as the adult molded by falsehoods and decisions not of my making. I heeded calmly, then stated, "Lucas, I adored you as my own. I provided all I possessed when I had little to offer. And when you uncovered the truth, you departed without retrospect. That was your decision, I honored it." He averted his gaze, remorse briefly appearing. "I was young, I didn't comprehend." "Perhaps not," I replied gently. "But now you're mature, and I've realized that affection isn't a tool for convenience." I rose, deposited sufficient funds on the table for the tab, and said, "I'll always hope for your success, son, but you can't return solely because I at last became noteworthy." I departed before he could reply. I still contemplate him occasionally, the child who wasn't mine, yet possessed my heart regardless. And though I'll never reclaim those vanished years or the purity I once held, I've acquired something immensely precious. Being a parent isn't defined by lineage, it's about fidelity. And fidelity signifies zilch to those who only reappear when society finally commends you. It had been nearly 2 years since that cafe encounter with Lucas. 2 years since I observed the youth I once nurtured, now an adult I scarcely identified, exit my life anew. Initially, I believed that concluded it. But existence dislikes tidy conclusions. It favors loops, chaotic, agonizing ones that revive ancient injuries precisely when you assume they've mended. I was 47 when Grace re-entered my existence. It commenced with a voice message. Her tone was unsteady, gentler than recalled. "Ray, it's me. I realize you likely don't wish to listen, but please, it's regarding Lucas. It's crucial." For several moments, I merely sat gazing at the device, attempting to comprehend the tempest those brief words ignited within me. She hadn't contacted me in nearly 10 years. When I eventually returned her call, she responded instantly, as if anticipating nearby. Her voice was wary, anxious. "Ray, I don't know another way to express this. Harold's departed. He abandoned me 2 years past. He relocated elsewhere. And Lucas, he's been facing difficulties. He doesn't converse with me often, but I know he requires assistance." I remained silent for an extended period. The quietude between us extended thinly. At last, I inquired, "Why share this with me?" She exhaled, "Because regardless of all occurrences, you were perpetually the sole constant in his life. You were the parent he required, even if he didn't recognize it at the time. Please, Ray, don't penalize him eternally. I emitted a sardonic chuckle. You believe I'm the one penalizing him? Grace fell silent. In that hush, I could nearly envision her countenance again, the one I formerly adored. The one that beamed at me over illuminated suppers and murmured vows we both violated differently. After some time, I said, I'll consider it, and disconnected. But I didn't contact Lucas, not at that point. Several months later, I received another note, this time from Lucas directly. Mom informed me she reached you. I know I don't merit another shot, but I must discuss, please. Contrary to my wiser instincts, I consented to meet. We gathered at the identical cafe where I'd bid farewell previously. It seemed odd entering those doors once more, like re-entering an incomplete narrative. When he spotted me, he rose clumsily. He appeared altered, not merely aged, but weary. The bold energy he'd once possessed had vanished, substituted by something delicate. Thanks for arriving, he said softly. I nodded, seating myself opposite him. For a few minutes, we both remained wordless. He toyed with his mug, evidently hunting for phrases that arrived with difficulty. At last, he said, I erred, Ray. I recognize that now. I uttered and performed actions I can't retract. He gulped, eyes shimmering. When Harold departed, I believed I was indifferent, but he didn't even bid farewell. He simply vanished. And Mom, she's been battling. I thought I was too mature to feel forsaken, but it struck me more intensely than anticipated. I examined him attentively, uncertain if to experience compassion or doubt. He gazed at me and said, You were the sole one who ever remained. And I discarded that. That phrase, those terms, struck more profoundly than he realized. I desired to be furious. I wanted to recall the evenings I sat solitary pondering my errors, or the anniversaries I overlooked because he rejected me. But all I sensed was fatigue. I don't despise you, Lucas, I said eventually. I never did. I merely ceased pursuing those unwilling to be pursued. He nodded gradually. I understand that. We conversed for almost 2 hours that day about his challenges, his remorse, his intentions. He aimed to return to education, perhaps initiate a modest venture. He wasn't requesting funds, not outright. But I could detect the reluctance in his voice, the deliberate breaks where dignity and necessity clashed quietly. When we eventually rose to depart, he regarded me and said, Do you believe we could begin anew? I paused before responding. Beginning anew requires sincerity, Lucas. It means you don't vanish again when existence provides what you desire. He nodded, I won't. For a period, matters were positive. We commenced meeting weekly, dining, conversing as in his childhood. It was tentative, brittle, but genuine. I assisted him enroll in a technology course and even offered him a minor position at my company, primarily clerical tasks. It wasn't benevolence, it was an evaluation for us both. Months transpired and I began to trust perhaps, just perhaps, individuals could transform. Then one day I received a call from a supervisor. Hey Ray, unsure if you're aware, but your son's been attempting to persuade customers to fund a cryptocurrency plan. He's been utilizing the firm's title for legitimacy. My spirit plummeted. I challenged him that night. He appeared trapped yet rebellious. It's not as you assume, he stated. I was merely attempting to earn additional cash. You lack understanding of how challenging it is to exist under your influence. Lucas, I said deliberately. You employed my company's designation. You deceived customers. That's not drive, that's deceit. He stared fiercely, fury igniting. You consider yourself impeccable. You think because you were the virtuous one, all owe you pardon. You're merely resentful because Mom selected another. That ancient injury, the one I believed had healed, tore open anew. I stood mute for a prolonged instant before I said, I didn't forfeit your mother, Lucas. I forfeited my belief in those who mistake benevolence for frailty. He didn't reply. He simply exited in anger. That marked our final conversation. He resigned the following day, leaving only a brief message. I can't become who you expect me to be, and perhaps he was correct. Maybe neither of us could ever fulfill our intended roles in one another's lives. A year afterward, I heard from Grace once more, but this occasion it wasn't a phone call. It was a correspondence. Her script was unsteady, the pigment irregular as if composed amid sobs. Ray, I'm ill. The physicians indicate it's grave. I'm not seeking aid, only pardon. I destroyed the finest occurrence in my life, you. And I nurtured a son who bears my errors rather than his own. If you encounter him again, please remind him that you were the only genuine father he ever possessed. He may never confess it, but he senses it profoundly. I'm remorseful for all. Grace, I didn't know how to react upon completing it. Sorrow, wrath, solace, perhaps all simultaneously. I never encountered her again. She departed this world a few months later. Lucas didn't participate in her burial. He dispatched blossoms but didn't appear. And somehow that seemed the most appropriate conclusion to our narrative. A household fractured by deceptions, rejoined by remorse, and dismantled again by arrogance. I still observe Lucas occasionally from a distance. He's managing adequately now from reports. Employed at a promotion agency, residing independently. We don't communicate, but I don't resent him. Because despite all, he imparted something no achievement ever could. That tranquility doesn't arise from reclaiming what was lost. It arises from ultimately releasing what was never genuinely yours initially. When individuals inquire if I have offspring, I still hesitate briefly before replying. Then I say, gently but firmly, I once did. Because for 8 wondrous, agonizing years, I was a parent. And even if the universe declares otherwise, I know that's something no genetic examination can obliterate.